I would love to hear from Commanders fans on
Yeah, let
whether
us
they
know.
agree or disagree with the statement, but I think Ron's approval rating at this point is at almost near Dan Snyder levels.
Ron Rivera is a guy that you'd love to get an ice cream cone with and talk about life, but unfortunately,
That's
that
got
does
to be the opening.
that does bring the football game. Pop, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. Doing okay. Sports will break your
Well,
heart sometimes. So.
sometimes. I wish it was only sometimes in this city, man. Oh, it was a tough one. That was a tough game to watch. Tough thing to be a part of at this point in the season. It's definitely pretty frustrating, but what are you gonna do? I think there's a lot of takeaways from this. I see a lot of people kind of starting to echo some of the points that I've kind of been feeling, some of the things we've been talking about off mic about this team and the direction and that kind of stuff. So I think today's the day to let's react to the Bears game. We're going to talk about it. Or talk about maybe is it time for some coaching changes? We're going to cover all those topics, and then we're going to spend some time doing like a quarter season review, kind of talk about more the big picture. Let's zoom out from Chicago. But since it's Monday morning, you guys are watching this now. We know you're tuned in sharp 10 a.m. Eastern time. You've been waiting all weekend for it. So let's get into the game first off. So Pop, you want to do a little bit of you want to give me your jump game reactions, quick, like almost like a
Sure.
vibe check, but give me the quick thoughts on the game or just where you're at in general right now.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of it, it's 40-20 for Chicago, 27-3 at the half. I know everybody knows that. But, we did make a little run at them at the end, and a lot of people saying that Joey Sly hit that field goal, to pull us within um,
Touchdown.
a touchdown, that things would have been, different. I'm not so sure, but it was certainly would have gotten interesting at that point. But they, at the end of the day, they didn't really deserve to come back and do
Yeah.
anything in that game. And to be honest, I'm kind of getting tired of having to be constantly put in that position, regardless of the competition. You really, it's a mess. It was a mess, I guess, is what I would say in
Yeah.
terms of the game itself. It was a big mess and very disappointing. I not shocked we would lose the game, which is sad in and of itself, but losing in the way we did, which is basically just getting crushed by the Bears, like a Bills game type scenario, except for
Worse.
maybe the comeback, um, is very, very disappointing as a fan, as I'm sure everybody's, feeling, and just can't figure this team out, honestly.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. Like the Bills game, I would put it worse than the Bills game, frankly, and we'll talk about that and why later on when we get into the season review. But I mean, it was pretty apparent just right off the bat, like Chicago had something on tape about this team, and I think Philly put a lot of good tape out on us the week before with the double moves and with the way we were struggling to kind of cover AJ Brown and the kind of things that they were doing in the pass game, the success that where they were having success on the ground, because that's the bottom line is like there is some inherent flaw in our defensive scheme that has been exposed. For Matt Eberflus, guy who was on pace to be America's favorite Uber driver by week 6, to completely out scheme our defense, loaded with 6 first round picks back there, to completely expose us, to get our first rounder, number 16 overall, 13 on his jersey, to get him benched within 2 quarters of the game. There is something that is on tape about this team, and we can, get into scheme specifics in a bit, but there's something on tape about this team and about the way the defense is being coached and the defense is playing right now that was widely exposed because was it 3 or 4 Chicago Bears in total caught passes? DJ Moore was the only receiver that produced at all. And he put up, I mean, I think he might still be running. If you go out in Landover, he might still be running with the football somewhere down there, just waiting to be tackled.
Well,
I mean, he put up
it could have been worse, right? They
230,
called him out of bounds when he clearly wasn't.
and Fields sailed him on 5 or 6 throws. I mean, if
Yeah.
Fields had Brock Purdy's ability, if Fields looked like Jimmy Garoppolo, DJ Moore would have had 300 yards. I mean, Fields did not throw the ball well. If you watch the game and you saw like
Not
the
consistently
passes,
well, but
not
he had
consistently well,
some good balls.
he had a lot of big misses that would have gone for 7. And not to say that he didn't go for 7 enough. I mean, he delivered. But
4
8 for
touchdowns ain't too
230.
bad.
Yeah, and 8 for 230 and 3 TDs. To look at that and to say it could have and should have been worse is nuts. It's nuts. And you see, we got cooked on the double moves. We got cooked on missed tackles. The secondary doesn't cover. The secondary doesn't tackle. It's a nightmare. The front four, we were getting completely worked by the Chicago Bears offensive line. We've got 4 first-round picks on that defensive line. We've got a guy, number 2 overall. We've got a guy we just paid, 8 figures. 2 guys with 8-figure contracts. And we've got another guy that's about to get one in Montez Sweat. It's nuts. It's nuts. It is really just crazy what we saw there.
Yeah, but I think it comes down to, I mean, a couple of things, maybe to react to your points. One, I think defensively, there are 2 big problems that I have. One is scheme. They played afraid of Justin Fields because of his legs. That the defense at times did get pressure, but he made him pay because of his legs, and they just didn't have the right scheme for that. The second problem I have is the situation with Emmanuel Forbes. It reminds me, for different reasons, of what we have with William Jackson at the beginning, of last season. Until they decided to make that change, things kind of turned around for the defense. And what I don't understand is, I know he's your first-round pick, and you made a bold pick to go with Forbes instead of Gonzalez and go defensive back. But stop defending your decisions by putting someone in when they're not ready, when they're clearly not ready. And at the beginning of the season, the first couple of games, they were limiting his snap count. And then all of a sudden, against the Eagles, we're going to put him on their best player as a receiver one-on-one the whole game.
Well, he got benched.
See how he does. And the explanation is the kid's got to learn. Like, come on. And then you bench him, which what is that going to do for his confidence? And, I'm a big believer in not writing off rookies. So I'm far from writing off Emmanuel and saying that he can't become a really good player in this league. But you're putting him in a position to fail. You should know that he's not ready. And if you want to give him a shot, because it's hard to tell in practice, I don't know, but you should be able to tell. You react quicker to not put him in those positions and have him get beat by a drum, like a drum. There are definitely holes in this defense. Linebacker, secondary is clearly not as good as they we thought. But I just don't think the coaching is putting the players in the position to succeed. I think that's the thing. And, one other gripe for me is, can I stop playing against fantasy teams that have players on the other team that just cook? I looked after the game. Man. I wasn't even paying attention. And I look at it, I was like, who's got DJ Moore in our league? Sure enough, it's who I'm playing. And last week it was A.J. Brown and Swift. I mean, come on. Like, the Commanders are costing me games in the fantasy league. They're the Commanders are the single biggest reason why I'm losing games in fantasy.
Do you have David Montgomery in your starting lineup this week?
I do this week for sure. I need a big game out of somebody.
I wasted a waiver claim on the Commanders defense because I figured going against the Bears, it's a get-right game. I'm sitting at -5 going into my matchup this week. So that's tough for sure. But I think it's a great point you make about the coaching. And I think coaching, it transcends just, do you call cool plays? And do you have nice blitz designs and do you have good coverages? Which, by the way, Jack Del Rio has none of. But coaching also includes, are you putting your players in a position to succeed? Are you evaluating your players honestly? Are you taking your own ego out of it when it comes to Emmanuel Forbes? That's an ego thing, in my opinion. That is, I picked this kid, number 16 overall, to be our lockdown corner and make our difference maker and get interceptions. And you watch him get torched all week against A.J. Brown. And then the Bears, who have no other wide receivers, by the way. Chase Claypool is in Miami now, didn't even travel with the team. Darnell Mooney is Darnell Mooney. I'd be willing to bet 80% of you guys, especially if you don't play fantasy football, it's the first time you've ever heard his name. And you have an all-pro caliber cornerback in Kendall Fuller, and the choice is to put Emmanuel Forbes on him.
I was just going to say that. Like, who would you say is our best corner? Kendall Fuller. Why isn't he guarding their best player?
And then when you look in terms of personnel decisions, you have a guy like Benjamin St-Juste who, you know what? Excuse me. I'm going to table this. We're getting a little raw here. I'm going to table this for the season. I want to make that a little bit more of a thorough analysis. This is not the time for this.
Yeah, so let me just give a couple of quick nuggets related to the game, right? I mean, you know, that may not be front and center in people's minds. I think the defense gives up 451 yards, right? 40 points to the Bears, kind of standard stat. We caught 55 straight pass plays, only 10 carries the entire game for our running back. I know that some of that's because we get behind, but that's kind of a shocking thing. And I think when people talk about the number of sacks we're taking and the number of hits, it has to do with the lack of balance in that ratio. We're dropping back so much that when you talk about 5 sacks after, that's just 55 in a row. I don't know what the total number of dropbacks were or pass, things, but, you're just increasing the odds of him taking hits and him taking sacks with that. So just shocking. And then, Ron Rivera, just the slow starts, it's incredible. I thought I wrote it down, but I got it right here. 41 of 56 games under Ron Rivera, we've trailed at halftime. Just stop for a minute and think about that. Moment of silence. How can that be? How
it's
can
unbelievable.
That be? You think to yourself, the slow starts. You say every week we talk about the slow starts, but it's a real, people. And
a
that's
little nugget,
shocking.
A little nugget on that. The Bears won the coin toss at the beginning of the game and elected to receive, which only 8% of the time is the choice that teams make when they win the coin toss. So they knew. They said, we've got something on tape about this team. We know they're going to come out flat and start slow. They're on a short week. We're on a short week. Things could get out of hand fast. Let's punch them in the mouth. And they came out, for all the talk of we played Philly and it was a really close game and the guys are still disappointed and sad from that. Number one, get over it. You're a professional. Play the next game. Number two, Chicago blew a 27-3 against Denver. They were up the same score, or 27-7, excuse me, and they blew that and lost. Who do you think is more demoralized coming into that game?
I do think we were flat. I think we were flat, and I don't think we responded well to the quick turnaround. I think those are real things. Yeah. But one team was able to overcome that, and the other wasn't. And that just speaks to who's at the head of the organization, running things and getting that team ready to play. Speaks to that. And I guess I know we're going to get onto the awards, and I'm going to give you just 30 seconds on this.
Do it.
What do you think related to making a coaching change? Where's your head out right now?
I'd be all in favor of it, and we'll talk about that, I think, when we get into the quarter season preview. But I understand why it's not happening, and I don't think we should expect it as fans. I think unless things go really sideways and we lose
Yeah.
like 6 straight or something like that. But we're on a 3-game losing streak now, and
Yeah.
things are, again, we'll get into it in the season, but the worst takeaway from that game before we get into the awards is after losing that game the way we lost it, you cannot look at the schedule and say we should win this game. You can't for the rest of the year. For the rest of the year, you cannot
Yeah.
look at the schedule and say that one's winnable. That's one we should win. That's one we should win. After losing like that to a team like that, I mean, you got to figure 10, 12 of those 53 are not going to be in the NFL next year. Like that's a terrible, terrible, terrible
But
team.
I also think, it wouldn't surprise me, and this is going to sound like making excuses. It wouldn't surprise me if we see some better things out of Chicago the rest of the way. But we just believe the hype. It just seems like this team more than any other team. You're supposed to blow out the Cardinals at home. We just play down to our competition or
Yep.
play up, and on occasion, not always. But even in that Bills game, I felt like we were overconfident as a team, and as
Yep.
a fan base. There was this, there's this over the confidence, and they smacked them down. And then they had the right frame of mind going into the Eagles, which is underdogs. We're going to have to coach a perfect game. We're going to have to play a near perfect game. And then you just, instead of, you're right. They can't overlook any team. They should play every game like they're the underdogs. And they don't do it. They don't do it. There's no reason for this team to be overconfident in any moment against any other team. And they play that way. They play with an arrogance at times. And it drives you nuts.
As if they play with
Like
an
they could
arrogance,
just walk
as
on the
if
field and perform well, right?
they play with an arrogance as if they didn't have Taylor Heineke pulling rabbits out of hats to beat the Indianapolis Colts 10-7 last year.
Yeah.
Like this is a bad team. But we'll get into that in the breakdown. Awards, we got nothing for the sauce. We got nothing
Nasuno.
for the sauce. Nasuno, that's our term for when there's just nobody deserves a sauce award, and it's got to go Nasuno. There's a lot of chatter about how on social media and what a crazy game he had, and if you purely look at the numbers, I mean, if I told you he was going to go 388, 2 touchdowns and an interception, which we're not talking about that interception enough, but we'll get into that. If I told you we were going to do that, you would say, holy crap, we smoked the Bears. But in reality, it was, 27-3 at the half. You got to play 4 quarters of football. Didn't even see that in Philly. We saw 3. So we'll give helmet stickers out. We're going to give one to Sam Howell. We're going to give one to Logan Thomas. 9 for 77 and a touchdown. He's clearly the primary target of this offense, for better for worse, or at least was against Chicago and seems to be whenever he's healthy. That's where Sam looks to put the ball, or that's what EB is scheming open. We don't know. Curtis Samuel, 6 for 65 and a touchdown. He's slowly putting together a really solid season.
Yeah.
I think he's doing what a lot of people thought Jahan was going to do this year. Chase Young will get a sticker. 11 total pressures. That's going to be the most pressures in the league from a single player in one game so far this season. So that's cool. There's room for more Chase Young discussion and stuff like that later on. But kickouts of the game, we're going to go defense. 100%. It's got to be on the defense. It's got to be on the defensive coaching. It's just the design of this football team. The reason why we were all so excited about Sam Howell going into the year was we said, hey, this defense was 3rd overall in the NFL last year. We can afford to take some lumps and bruises and some crappy games from Howell if this defense can perform at how we know they're capable of, and we can grind out some 13-9 victories. We can grind out some 17-14 victories while Howell gets his act together, because the defense is that special. And the defense, while Howell has been, in my opinion, well ahead of pace, the defense has been absolutely just complete nuclear meltdown. No exaggeration, on pace to be the worst defense of all time.
Yeah,
So,
I started ranting about the defense from the first game or second game. Like to me,
credit to Pop. You saw it early.
like all the pressure is on the offense, right? If the offense can't get off to a slow start, They can't have anything but drives for touchdowns to start out. It's just, yeah, incredibly disappointing. Historically bad. I mean, they're on a historically bad pace for points allowed.
Yeah.
Teams are putting up 30 plus on us like it's basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. So
I did say to my buddy going into the season, who works in the NFL, he's a real, football head, and he said to me, "So what do you think? Where do you think the Commanders land?" I said, "I think about 9 wins." He said, "You really believe in Howell that much?" I said, "There's no way to know with Howell." He said, "But I think this defense could be historic." And unfortunately, I was right. They're historically bad. So that's pretty
yeah,
frustrating and upsetting. I think that can segue us into our quarter season review segment, Pop. If you're ready to hit that, I don't think we need to
just
spend
do
any
it.
more time on awards. Um, let's start with the defense, but I think in general we're going to go top three concerns, top three reasons for optimism.
We got to try to
Um,
keep it balanced, son. I know you don't want to. I know you don't want to. I know you want to just
yeah,
shred them, but we got to try to keep it balanced. I
it
do think
feels
there's some things to feel good about. We got to balance things out, in
yeah,
my opinion.
it
And
feels a little bit like when you go into a job interview and they ask you what your greatest weakness is, and you go up there and you're like, I just can't put the work down. I take my work home. I never stop working. You got to spin it to be a strength. That's kind of how I'm feeling about the optimism bit. But
but
Pop's got some good
I would say
reasons.
this. I would
I'll come
say
up with some
this.
good stuff.
The NFL, it's a long season. It's much more, it goes by really fast, but there's a lot of season ahead. We go game to game, we just reach conclusions about they're
Yeah,
going to, they're not going to win 5 games, and then they're not going to do this, and they're not going to do that. There's a lot of season ahead of us. It's early still. That's all
yeah.
I'm going to
It's
say. It's
so
early still.
that's in terms of the season. I do agree. Unfortunately, I think the reason why this is such a turning point, at least I've seen in the fan base in terms of outlook on the team and pessimism, is these things are directly congruent with the shortcomings we've seen during the Ron Rivera era, so to speak, in Washington. This is exactly the same. The
Agreed.
the places we fall short and the reasons why we're not succeeding and the reasons why we're in this position is exactly the same. And I think unfortunately, I think if you we polled fans the night of Chicago, we got a ton of engagement. I think over 500 people saw the tweet. We got a bunch of people responding. And the resounding answer was no. This team doesn't win more than 5 games. I think realistically, they probably do. Vegas had the win total at 6.5 or 7.5, something like that. I think it's going to be most fans, I think, are expecting the exact same thing we've done every year, which is we'll be in the hunt graphic. We won't be mathematically eliminated until week 17, week 18, and we're not gonna get there. But so to get into a little bit more of the structure
I
here,
think it's full. I personally think I know it's part of what we all do. We all have fun
yeah,
projecting how many wins or losses this team has at this point is a joke.
yeah,
That's how I feel about it. Like we just don't know. Let's just be fans. Watch them the rest of the way. Season's still out in front of them. You know, I'm not ready to say it's going to be. There's reason to be concerned that it could be, and
yeah.
let's get into that. But I'm
So
not ready to say that's the way things are going to happen. It's one football game.
yeah, top three concerns. Um, we'll go back and forth on these. I'm sure we probably share a few. So maybe if we do share, we can just kind of spend that time
Yep.
discussing the shared. Spent a lot of time talking about the defense. I'm gonna switch the topics up because we'll probably spend a little more time talking about it. Offensive consistency is a huge concern for me. Maybe not number one, but it would have to be number two behind the defense for me. The bottom line is like we scored 3 points against the Chicago Bears in the first half. And if that game is 27-24 at halftime, we can yell about how terrible the defense was and we can yell about, oh, this sucks, this is blah blah blah. But the reality of it is a not a big reason because the defense was just out to lunch, but the offense going 3 and out on back to back drives to start the game does not help the defense either, and does not help this team at all. And scoring 3 points on the Chicago Bears in the first half is a problem. Scoring 3 points in total against the Buffalo Bills is a problem. Scoring 16 points in total against the Arizona Cardinals is a problem.
So who are you
And
putting
we've
that
seen
inconsistency on?
it's
Because
got to
I'll
be
tell
a
you, the offense is not on my list.
yeah,
And
it's
I'll
got
tell
to
you
be
why it's not on my list, maybe just to chop it up a little bit, but it's not on
yeah,
my list.
it's got to be a combination of the enemy's game planning. I think we see a reluctance to stick with what works, and I think what's really concerning for me is the target share and the way we're spreading the ball around and who's seeing targets and who's not. I mean, Terry McLaurin through 5 weeks has less targets than Chris Olave had in 3 weeks. That's an issue. And I think that's when we look at consistency. Why are we inconsistent? We're not putting the ball in our best player's hands. That's going to make you consistent, right? That's one thing. And then the other thing, Sam is young. He's going to take his bumps and bruises, and we're not helping him on the offensive line. We're not helping him with the run game. The run game has flashes and has big moments, but there's also a lot of 1st and 10 carries that go for -1 yards. So
But the
there's
offense is not. Can I explain why the offense is not on my list? Because, like,
absolutely, absolutely.
we got to avoid doing a 10-minute deep dive on every one of these. But the reason the offense is not on my list is simple. Like, to me, if I was going to do the classic review and say meets, exceeds, expectations, whatever, the offense is exceeding my expectations. Like, this is Bieniemy's first shot at the job. I think he's shown some flashes of some brilliance in terms of his play calling. I don't mind so much that they're spreading the ball around. I think that's an easy stat to pick on. They've shown the ability to put up points. They've shown the ability to do a 2-minute drill. I don't disagree with what you're saying, and not that I want to devolve into a big argument about it. But to me, like, the offense is where it's expected. We knew the offensive line was going to be a weakness, right? So
Yeah,
I don't get into more of that when I talk about my reasons for optimism, but the offense isn't on my list of reasons to be concerned for that
that's fair.
quick reason.
That's fair.
But
What was on your list?
I understand why you're explaining it that way.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly, respectfully, and with love from my pop, I wholeheartedly disagree. But we're not going to get into a whole argument about that. I don't think it's worth it. What is another reason for concern with you?
Well, you touched on the defense. I think we spoke enough about that, so
Yeah,
I don't have much more to say there.
it's all bad. There's
Coaching,
just nothing to break down.
but coaching from a perspective of we're getting out coached. Whatever the other coaches are scheming up against what we're scheming up, it's clearly better. It's clearly being out coached. We're playing checkers, they're playing chess. That's my problem. Without breaking it down and giving a bunch of examples, you've seen the games, and I'm not sure Ron's heart is completely in it anymore.
you know,
I sense the vibe, this vibe during preseason, during his interviews, and I think it's just this whole situation has taken a lot out of him. And I will
yeah,
say this because I do want to get it on the table. I really appreciate what Ron's been able to do for this team, for this organization these last few years under some extremely difficult circumstances. I don't think any other coach could have done better, just in terms of overall. There might have been coaches that did the X and O's parts better. But overall, he's managed the situation and allowed us to at least allowed this fan base to hold their heads high to a degree. I appreciate that. But I just feel like he's just reconciled himself to this is it for him. And I'm just not seeing that fire or that vibe or even the Ron Rivera of a year ago. He just, to answer questions at halftime to say, oh, I'll let the players do all the talking. Like, what?
yeah.
Why aren't you punching
You're
a
the head
chalkboard or
coach.
throwing a table over? If there's ever a game to do it in, it's that one. Get
You're the
their
head
attention.
coach. Yeah,
Bench
it's
some more
insane.
people, not the
It's
rookie.
insane. And I share with you that was my second concern is the coaching. Top down, slow starts, talent evaluation, schemes, everything is a failure in all three phases of the ball. Because to say there's reason for optimism in the offense, there have been some cool flashes and some nice things, but that offensive line is a train wreck. That offensive line is worse than we thought it could possibly be going into the
That's
year.
not coaching though. That's personnel.
But that's a concern for coaching.
Yeah.
See, here's exactly what you just said. I think you touched on something great. That's not coaching. That's personnel. Who's also in charge of
Well,
personnel?
that's my
Ron
third
Rivera.
concern. That's
Yeah,
my third concern is
perfect.
that
We're
Ron,
dialed in
the
here.
GM, is a failure, is a total and complete failure. The performance of our draft picks, the lack of good free agent pickups for the most part. There's always exceptions. You could talk about the trade he made where we got Dotson and the group of players out of that, including Howes being good. I give you that. But generally, we just haven't got good performance out of our draft picks, and there's a hell of a lot more misses than mates. And Ron, the GM, and this whole coach-centric situation ain't working. That's third, and obviously that's the number one thing more than anything else that's got to get corrected by ownership.
Yeah, I know. We said we'd do three. That's pretty much it for me, in terms
Yeah,
of the concerns, because it's simple. I mean, we can get more. The issue with Ron. I mean, let's call it what it is here, right? 18 of these 22 starters are Ron Rivera guys. You know who the guys that aren't Ron Rivera guys that were here before? Terry, Duran, Montez, John Allen.
your best players.
That should tell you everything you need to
Other
know.
than maybe,
Everything you need to know.
other than maybe Chase, who is starting to look like Chase again.
Sure, he was also the number 2 overall pick. I mean,
But he was like the obvious pick. It didn't take a lot of scouting to figure that out.
Don't count that. But
yeah. But anyway, I want to pull out some optimism out of you, son. I'm insisting.
All right.
I'm insisting that you give me 3 reasons. I know you don't want to do it. You can rattle them off quick, but give me 3 reasons that you feel somewhat optimistic about this team. I'm insisting. I'm going to end on a positive, people.
Josh Harris bought the team, and he partnered with Magic Johnson. So
that's a good one.
That means is Magic Johnson is on Twitter saying this is absolutely unacceptable. Magic Johnson.
There you go. You tilted it negative again. But
Magic Johnson hates losing.
Yeah.
I have confidence that he's at least going to be yelling at some people, trying to make some changes and get this team out of this. It will take a while. It's going to take longer than we want it to, but I think that's one reason for optimism. Reason 2 for optimism, because of reason 1, I think there's no way the band comes back together next year. I think we have shown at the lows. I think the lows of this team.
I'm not sure you're being positive here.
That's what I'm optimistic.
That's your angle. That's your angle. That's cool.
I told you.
That's cool.
I told you it's going to be like when they ask you what your greatest weakness is in a job interview. You got to make it a positive thing. I'm all negative this week. And
so changes are coming. That's number 2.
Changes are coming. Number 2. I think anybody with 2 eyes can see that we are a lot closer in terms of the extremes that we've seen this season. I think we're a lot closer to the Buffalo game and the Chicago game than we are the, first, second, and fourth quarters against Philly and the third and fourth quarter against Denver. But
I would love to hear from Commanders fans.
Yeah,
whether
let us
they
know.
agree or disagree with the statement, but I think Ron's approval rating at this point is at almost near Dan Snyder levels.
Yeah.
Maybe for very different reasons, obviously. He's a man with a lot of integrity and a good man by all accounts. But, I think it just feels like the fan base is united that maybe, he rides the season out, but that's got to be it. We've got to make a change.
You'd love to look. Ron Rivera is a guy that you'd love to get an ice cream cone with and talk about life. But unfortunately,
that's got to be the opening.
That doesn't win you football games. And, it's just.
Hey, I love my ice cream. My Ron, anytime.
Me too.
I'll buy.
Chocolate chip,
I'll buy.
Ron can come on the pod.
Anything off the menu that's ice cream related, I got it.
But so that's 2. And number 3, I got to give some flowers here. When you look at situation number 2, if we do clean house coaching wise and we do move on and we bring in a general manager, talent wise, I don't think this team is that far off. I really don't. There is a
Yeah.
lot of raw talent. It needs to be coached up. It needs to be analyzed by somebody a lot smarter than the two of us that says, okay, we're going to flip Duran and John Allen because Duran works better with Sweat or vice versa. We're going to stand up Chase Young like they do with Micah Parsons in Dallas, and we're going to rush with a 5-man front so that his gap discipline doesn't matter as much. We're going to retool the offensive line. Anybody with 2 eyes can see that has to happen. But the amount of talent that we have combined with the young quarterback makes me feel like we could see a turnaround similar to what Jacksonville saw in between years 1 and year 2 with Trevor Lawrence, should we put a good coach, a good GM, the right people in place. Talk about Ben Johnson. You could talk about Kevin O'Connell. Should he become available? You could talk about Robert Saleh. Should he become available? I have a feeling we'll have a few podcasts dedicated to that at the end of the season. So we don't need to get into it now. But that's my biggest reason for optimism is I think the nucleus of this situation is there. But unfortunately, I don't think Ron Rivera is part of that nucleus in any way. I'm not sure anybody other than maybe Eric Bieniemy, maybe, and I'll look at that after 17 games. But Ron and Jack certainly aren't. So those are my 3 reasons.
So I'm going to go fast here, son. I'm going to go fast. I think a little different. I kind of anticipated some of your takes, so I just went a little different direction. I agree with a lot of yours. Number 1 for me is Sam Howell. It's obvious. Look, you could talk about the first half of last game, be frustrated about 100% that. I saw some digs at Sam. But what he did in the second half is not average by any means. And some of the balls he throws are elite. And you don't get that out of any quarterback. You just don't. And he just puts the ball in incredibly tight spaces with great arm talent and great velocity. And going 37 for 51 for 388 yards and what he's accomplished overall, this season, bar one horrible game against a really good team that even made Miami not look so great. Sam Howell is a reason for optimistic, and more he's looking like, a quarterback that we could count on for some years to come. And that's a huge advantage for this team if that's the case. My other reason is we're only 5 games in, right? You look at, and I agree with you, we shouldn't be favored against anyone at this point, but you look at Atlanta, New York, Eagles back at home, the Pats, going to Seattle is tough, but then New York again. You win these next 2. I know it's a big if. You win these next 2, the vibe completely changes in this situation. And I think that I'm not going to say I think that's going to happen, but it could happen. So the season is way out in front of us. There's a lot of season to go. This team could rally. And this mini bye comes at a good time because they can, maybe if they come back and win that game, it's not such a great thing because they have this belief that they're more than they are. So maybe getting slapped in the face against Chicago, mini bye, time to do some evaluations, make some adjustments, realize what you got and what you don't got as a team. There could be some better times ahead this season. And then, the third one I put it there is Chase looking more and more like Chase. I think that's a positive. I think there's some good performances. I'd even throw guys like, we talked about Logan Thomas, Curtis Samuel, Terry's going to be Terry. There's been some bright spots on this team. And I think I'd put Chase in a bright spot, in terms of him looking more and more like himself. We need to see him continue to dominate, continue to get on that stat sheet. But those would be my positives here.
Yeah, and I think Chase is just such a perfect example of and you don't know, to be fair, you just don't know what the conversations are. Maybe Del Rio is telling Chase to do all the right things and Chase wants to do the way Chase is doing them, right? But I think Chase is such a perfect example of the issue, like what we talked about, that nucleus is there and those reasons for optimism are there. We just got to harness them the right way.
Coach them up.
Because we can see the
Coach them
talent.
up.
It's got to be coached right. It's got to be set up right. This thing ran super long, guys. If you're still with us, thanks for hanging in. A lot of feelings, a lot of big emotions, a lot of things to work through after that game. That was a tough one, but hey, it's the mini bye, so we get to give a little bit of a season breakdown as well, and we will be back for the preseason podcast as you guys expected later on in this week. So, without further ado,
Pre-game,
thank you
not
guys so much
preseason.
for watching.
We're in the regular
Pre-game.
season right now. So.
Pre-game, excuse me. Had a Rivera moment there. Hey, look, I'm gonna look at my speech. I'm gonna build on it, and I think we did some really good things for the most part. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Without further ado, I've been Dom.
This is Pop.